Welcome to Elevate Hotel Design, the podcast that explores the latest innovations and trends in the hospitality industry. I'm your host, Lorraine Francis with Cadiz Collaboration, and today we're diving into the world of hospitality asset management and development. In this episode, we have a special guest, Rich Levins from Fulcrum Hospitality, a company known for its strategic approach to enhancing the value and performance of hotels. We'll also touch on some exciting projects we have collaborated on together, Sonoma and Napa, where we transformed the Cambria hotels into Hilton Tapestry hotels this year. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rich Levins, Senior Vice President at Fulcrum Hospitality. Rich has played a key role in guiding hotels through successful transformations and driving innovation in the industry. And today he'll share insights from his journey and the impact Fulcrum Hospitality is making in the world of hotel design and management. So, Rich, welcome aboard. Thanks so much for joining us. And it was really a pleasure of getting to know you over the past year. So we're excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great to see you. And thank you for inviting me on the podcast.
Yeah, and I think always what I love about these podcasts is we do a little pre-work and kind of understanding your background. And it's always just interesting uncovering things that we didn't know about people and really diving into these aspects of new relationships. And the hospitality world is so great that it's always very hospitable. And I think just learning from other people is really great. So maybe you could just share some of your background and what really even led you into the hospitality career.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're exactly right. It's so important in our business, I think, to get to know people on a personal level. And I think in when we were working together, I don't know if you were picking up on this, but I like to be extremely organized, very straight to the point, keep things on track. I think I get a reputation for being pretty rigid, but getting to know one another, I think you can tell I'm a little bit of a softie, and I've got that other side to me. But originally, I wanted to be a chef, actually. When I was growing up, we would watch TV with my parents, and my mother was very strict with the television. She said, look, you're welcome to watch TV, but if you want to watch TV, you're going to want to watch what I'm watching, which at the time was Ina Garten and Rachel Ray. Emerald was big at the
Oh, yeah.
time. And so I started taking a liking to cooking and I'm still cooking quite a bit, but through my work experiences, got to experience the kitchen life, got to experience working in hotels, got to experience the real estate and finance and development side as well, and was very fortunate to be able to have this diversity of experiences and figure out what I really liked, which was this hospitality asset management role. I've been here now at Fulcrum for almost 12 years now. And I think what I like most and love about this job is the intersection between the operations and the fact that no one day is the same as another. And it still ties in some of the real estate finance and the mathematics and analysis component too. So I get to play in both worlds, which is very fun.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think kind of those things, I feel like always when we go to a hotel, we might see a general manager, and I feel like they just cut, there's so much background from, they might have started as the bellman. So I feel like those are actually unique relationships. Like someone really like using that hospitality industry to really climb the ladder, and all of a sudden they're VP of the brand. So it's interesting to know from your hospitality. And I think you also mentioned like you used to travel a lot, and your mom, and just like that whole like traveling had really got you into it. So then did you go, so right from Cornell, did you start at Fulcrum?
Right from Cornell, I started at Fulcrum. I was interviewing for a bunch of jobs. I graduated in 2013, and the economy was decent at the time, but it was still difficult to find the perfect job. I think the challenge when you're job hunting is you want to find the best possible opportunity for yourself. And at that point in one's life, you don't have the experience yet to really know what's going to work. And I was applying for development companies. I was applying to work for hospitality REITs. I was applying to work for development companies like Tishman, and Lowe's Hotels at the time was building a lot of property. And I was introduced to Jonathan Core, my colleague here, who's also been at the company for coming up now on 13 years. And he has a career working as hospitality asset manager at LaSalle Hotel Properties, which was acquired by Pebblebrook. And I was introduced to Jonathan through a professor at the time, randomly in the hallways. He was supposed to be on sabbatical in Singapore. And I saw him in the hallway, and I said, Professor Kwan, what are you doing here? And we caught up for a couple minutes, and he said, hey, have you ever heard of Fulcrum Hospitality? And I said, no. He said, let me put you in touch with Jonathan. So we met, and the rest is history. But at the time, our company was very small. It was just Jonathan and Steve Angel, and Steve has a long career here on both the private equity side, the consulting, and hotel operations. In fact, he got his start in housekeeping. So when I eventually met Steve, I of course, objectively, it was risky to take a position at a quasi startup at the time. I was the third employee. We were working on maybe 2 or 3 properties at the time. So it was a very small fledgling company. Steve had been at Goldman Sachs, at Highgate. He has a Wharton MBA, so very smart guy. And what resonated with me at the time was he had all of the smarts and the Wall Street background with none of the ego. And I
Yep.
found that was something that really resonated with me, that I wanted to emulate in my own career. So I had offers to join other companies, but eventually Steve, and I think it's been an amazing ride so far. So our company now has grown to, I think we have about 105 hotels that we work on now. We're 35 people currently. We have 3 new hires joining us soon. So we'll be almost 40 people. And I started as an analyst and have climbed the ranks here to now be senior vice president. And I lead a team on my portfolio. It's extremely exciting to have been given the opportunity, frankly.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But for our listeners, I think it's also telling industry is really unique. You don't get there's a brand, there's an asset manager, there's a developer, all these aspects. So what does an asset manager truly do? And how does
Yeah.
that kind of support in the hospitality industry?
Happy to dive into that. And again, when I was applying for jobs, I remember that the industry is so much more broad than I think people give it credit for. They understand there's brokers, there's advisors, there's consultants, there's owners, operators, and asset managers. And it was a whole new world to uncover, right? So from an asset management standpoint, I view us different than consulting, right? Consulting is a team that we'll hire to come in, fly out, help us with a specific analysis. So when we were working on, and we'll get into this more on the podcast, I'm sure, when we were working on the 2 properties with you out in Napa and Sonoma, we brought in a host of consultants to help us on this one very specific project. And we'll talk about that more. But my role here at Fulcrum as an asset manager is to work in partnership with our owners to execute a business plan. So we see typically from the time that a hotel is acquired to executing the business plan to selling the property and the owner realizing their return from the investment. Our job is to work very closely with the operator and collaboratively to accomplish whatever the investment goals are. So it could be replacing the manager, replacing team members. It could be changing the brand. It could be renovating the property. I'm working on one hotel now where in Aruba, where we renovated the property pre-COVID. Now there's an opportunity for us to actually build a new tower on the campus of our property. And so that is a development piece that's been relatively new for me and very exciting. So these are things that all contribute to executing the business plan and ultimately maximizing value for an owner of real estate.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think for you, yes, you have a close relationship with Ohana real estate investors. So it's been really a true partnership. So you want to discuss that relationship together and how you've worked together to locate properties and distressed assets and then you coming on board with that
Yeah,
as a
certainly. Ohana has been an amazing group to work with, extremely smart people, very communicative and responsive. So Jonathan Loke and I have known each other for probably coming up on 12 years now. Jonathan actually used to work at Fulcrum. So I believe Jonathan used to work for Ernst & Young and came over to work at Fulcrum and was here for several years and then left to go pursue another career opportunity on the West Coast. And then eventually ended up joining Ohana. And that, I think, was the genesis for this opportunity. Ohana has a large portfolio, very talented people. They do a lot of their asset management in-house. And this was an opportunity that came out of just relationships and networking and staying in touch with people, which is so important in our business. And Jonathan and our team caught up, and there was this opportunity where they were taking this property over from the lender. Unfortunately, the original developers found themselves in a position where they couldn't fund the debt service. And so the lender ended up foreclosing on the assets, and then Ohana ended up buying those assets out of the foreclosure process. So it was a bit of a distressed situation, to use your term, for sure. And they saw an opportunity for us to come in and do some asset management, work with the operators, help them effectuate the brand change, work with them to negotiate the PIP process, property improvement plan process. I know you've talked about that on your podcast before. and the franchise agreement with Hilton and eventually get to where we're at now, which is extremely exciting point where we're Hilton properties now. So we accomplished the transition plan on time. Remarkably, it was an extremely quick process. Azul is the management company there. They did a fantastic job on moving these things extremely quickly in California. That can be a challenge. And working with your team on the branding, and we can talk about this in more detail. But I think it was extremely helpful to have you and Jennifer and your team involved in the branding process as we converted them from a Cambria hotel to a Hilton Tapestry. Hilton Tapestry is this soft brand, similar in some ways to the Curio brand, to Marriott has Autograph and Tribute. For example, Hyatt has Unbound collection. There has been this proliferation of these soft branded hotels, which are extremely interesting, and they each carry their own sort of unique local story. And for us, having you involved with the branding agency at the same time allowed us to be on the same page earlier with the owners, with the branding company, with you, with us, with Azul, importantly, to accomplish this all on time. I think we had a name and a branding story maybe in less than 45 days. And I'm going through this same process now on another property, and it has not been easy. So I just want to say I really appreciate the partnership and how on the same page everyone was in that process.
Yeah. No, and I think for us, those properties were like near and dear. So those were our kind of our COVID projects. One opened in 2021. One opened in Napa opened in 2022. And definitely they went on hold in the middle because we had to find some more money and to have that glass of wine, that opening as a Cambria. I think Napa was the 69th Cambria hotel in the United States. And that was really exciting. But obviously we were a little devastated when we found out like, oh my God, they're going to lose them. So that was disappointing. But I think working with Azul has been a great relationship for our team. And we work really well together also. So them like introducing us and bringing us on was really great to just be able to honor the story. And I think the developer, we're doing other projects with them, but I think they really picked great cities and great towns that were really destinations. And I think even though Cambria is part of choice, we were like, oh, Cambria. But I think we really made them a boutique story, and we love storytelling in our design. So it was super easy when we came on board, and me bringing on Grizzly also, and really working collaboratively to do that. And then really seeing how, you didn't want to change everything. You really wanted to honor a current fresh design. And I think for us, even when we first saw, I think I went up there for a visit and I saw your first pictures of it. And I was like, oh my God, it's the same exact guest room. And this photography is so much better. It makes it seem so much better. And it just changed it with the story. So that was really great to see that things didn't get changed and being part of the evolution of it and being able to still continue to stay up in Napa and get a friends and family discount. We love that. So,
Absolutely. Listen, I think stepping into that project, you and the developers and the team that was working on those projects did an amazing job of building quality products with upscale design that was like approachable luxury, I would say. And so the conversion, one of our big challenges on this conversion was how do we change the narrative, the story, the branding, the positioning of this asset without doing a whole lot on the capital side, right? Because from an investment standpoint, we're focused on, sure, on the operating side, we're focused on maximizing revenues, reducing costs, maximizing profitability, because ultimately hotels are bought and sold on a multiple of their profit. Operationally, that's one thing, but on an investment standpoint too, of course, the owners are hopeful that they're spending the least amount of money possible on their capital projects. So the fact that you guys designed such an amazing property in the beginning for both assets made our jobs a little bit easier in that respect, that we could focus on some of the softer things like the artwork, for example, which is, there wasn't a ton of artwork in there to begin. So we could really take the nice pieces that were there in the lobby and some of the elevator landings and build upon that story to accomplish what we have today. And I'm proud to say that we were under budget on that renovation, thanks in part to your help. So it really was an excellent example of team collaboration.
yeah, no, and especially for us, it was so great because we did run out of money towards the end. So I think had to get value engineered. So being brought upon that to like finish it was great for us. So that was really good. And I think also Napa working with Grizzly, and because some things were actually the original of that project was HBA was the designer. And I was with Gensel at the time. We came in second place and I was like, wow, we came in second place. And then HBA got let go while it had started construction. So we also came on as like ramrods because we had to redesign the guest rooms. We had to bring it down $1.5 million. And it was all like, we're under construction. Let's do this right now. So we stepped into this big pile and they're like, oh my God, let's just let him go, let him go. So our team really stepped into that at a pretty late part of the game to implement a new design and really storytelling, because it really is like, I used to travel between Napa and Sonoma, just it's that 45-minute drive between the two properties, an hour drive. And it's just so beautiful. And I think when Grizzly came on board with us and really us telling them what drove us with the sage colors and the burgundy and the wine and kind of renaming it Knoll was so appropriate. And it was just like that just name just feels like it just rolls off. And I think when I drove up there a few weeks ago, I was like, there it is, it's Knoll. So it just was really great to see that. And I think also when we went to Sonoma, I felt like it took us a little bit longer to get the name and maybe another 3 days longer. But I think finding that idea of Centro was that just had a much more approachable, a younger feel for that being a little bit a different area than Napa. So those are really great to see how those stories evolve. So that was really great from our perspective. And really, you guys and Jonathan and you super fast making decisions and really giving good insights. And I think that was really helpful to really meld as the team together. It's like, all right, what do we call it? Okay, we'll do this. Does that work? And we really worked through that together to meet those deadlines and open the property successfully. So,
Yeah, that really spoiled me, frankly, because as these soft brands have become more appealing to investors and the brands have been created, and we're seeing now Hilton and Marriott, they're acquiring, and Hyatt are acquiring other brands to build their portfolio. I haven't really done a ton of these branding processes. So this over the last 5 years is relatively new to me. And so I think it spoiled me a little bit on how quick the process went, but
yeah.
it's extremely important to be organized and to follow up. We've been pretty happy to see the results of the properties trending in the right direction, and allowing us to rebrand to Hilton has enabled the properties to tap into a different demographic and a different customer. And in our business, we use STR reports, Smith Travel Research reports. It's part of CoStar now. And it's a report that allows you to benchmark your performance to a competitive set of hotels. So before COVID, or during COVID, when they opened as Cambria, the hotels, just to use Napa as an example, were generally in like the 90 to 100% range, which is not bad. Typically, it can vary depending on who's in your comp set and what are unique attributes about your property. But based on the competitive set, which is Hilton Garden Inns, Best Western, there were properties that really post-conversion, you almost laugh a little bit that they're in the comp set. And you're just like, okay, 100 is not the right number here. We should be doing much better. And I'm very proud to say, in partnership with sort of Hilton, with Azul, with our team on the ground, that the hotels are performing much better, like closer to 120% index now, which is even greater than where we had originally expected them to be. So these are some of the data points that we use when we're evaluating ourselves and our management partners around, like, how good of a job are we doing? Are we on track?
Oh, exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think for us, it's always been as designers, I think also a little bit learning under Barry Sternlicht. So we did a lot of stuff for the Phoenician and owned assets. And it was like, great, you get to work on these 5-star properties, but I don't have a 3-star budget. So we're like, all right, we've always been trained to work on a higher level, star level with a lower budget. And I think I think once when Napa first opened, I think our client's daughter was there and she went to the closet and was like, where's my bathrobe? So it was just that whole idea of expecting this kind of like bathroom experience and like you're staying at a 5-star, but it was still done on a budget with Cambria and making sure that they kind of work, and seeing that roll easily into Tapestry is like a great testament for us to keep being smart about our selections, about our choices, about budgeting, and really understand just the market today. And those were expensive times in 2020 and 2021 and 2022 to build. And also with the cost of FF&E during those times, it was definitely tricky. So we had to keep working on it. And I think that's for our pride and project. It's always been working as like internal interior design director for the companies, having those long-term relationships so that you really get a win with everything. So thanks for letting us expand on that and be part of the new branding. So I think from your perspective, I think what do you see moving forward, like some just really great trends happening in hotel development and design today? And what are really guests looking for? So you're seeing a new market because you had a lot of staycations and people locally, then people went to Europe, and now are they coming back, and what are they pushing you for? And what do you see you spending money in now?
Yeah, the design trends is something, frankly, I don't know a ton about. We work with
Mhm.
several designers, and it's really interesting to hear the different perspectives. I think what we're seeing and what we've seen over the last few years is a real pivot and a focus on ESG initiatives and environmentally friendly building materials, something that's been in hotels now for probably, I don't know, 8 years or so, are the bulk amenity dispensers in bathrooms, for example, which helps cut down on single-use plastics. So designing a room in a way that is accommodating and friendly to accepting those types of things, right? Like, we have to think about now, how is the shower design different to accept these bottles? Are they gonna be mounted on the wall? Are they gonna be freestanding on the bench? Which we find is an application that's done more in luxury properties versus select service or even some of the upper upscale full service where they're mounted. And the brands have certain standards for these things. At the end of the day, what we see right now with corporate travel rebounding in many of our markets is still not fully rebounded to the pre COVID levels. We've seen groups start to get there back to 2019 levels. Leisure is certainly past our pre COVID peaks, but corporate is still fighting to get there. And in many of our markets, we're not back to the pre COVID level of business transient and consultants and just regular business travelers who are there Monday through Thursday. So as that has continued to come back, we're seeing a real focus on elite appreciation, which is basically how guests with their statuses at these brands are treated. So from less of a design standpoint, what we're seeing as a trend right now is a need to focus back on the operational component and the script game. And during COVID, we didn't have really any business travelers to contend with, and it was all leisure. And now it's a different ball game. Right now on this project that we're building in Aruba, it's the Hilton Aruba Resort, and we're building a 160 room tower on the campus. And what was unique about that process and the project, we're expecting to open at the end of next year in 2025. So we've got the steel structure up about 60% of the way, and they're framing and doing the rough-ins as they go up. But what was unique about this process is, in order to secure the permits for building, they had
Mhm.
to essentially submit the structural package without the full design and construction documents. So we're almost building the plane as we fly a little, which is extremely dangerous, both literally and figuratively. And what we've found is, just working in partnership with our architects, our designers, our project managers, and our engineers has been extremely important, just to keep everybody on the same page. We have our weekly OAC calls, which have 25 people on these calls, and it gets a little unwieldy. But from a trend standpoint, what we really tried to focus on there is just building as large of a room footprint as we could fit within the building, maximizing our ocean views in that specific climate. We find that the premium that people are willing to pay on vacation for ocean view rooms is substantially higher than those that they would be willing to pay for a garden view, for example. Um, I wouldn't pay it, but many people do. And so we've tried, within the confines of the structure that we agreed to get the permit, because now that the permit's in place, we can't change the structure. We're trying to maximize the views. We're trying to design the balcony furniture in a way that is conducive to seeing the ocean as much as possible. We're trying to make the bathroom as inviting as possible. We originally did not have a double vanity in the bathroom, and we were able to figure out how to put a double vanity in the bathroom, obviously, because that exudes a sense of hospitality and luxury that will allow us theoretically to charge a higher rate to the customer. At that level, we're separating the toilet and the shower, right? And creating a separate water closet. And then I think one of the last things I would say, just from a design standpoint, is the flooring, something that's changed quite a bit, I would say, over the last 10 years. And you can probably comment on this as well, just in terms of pivoting away from carpet and
Yeah.
doing more hard surface flooring with area rugs is been, I think, perceived as more upscale and clean and hygienic, frankly.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that was also, you said that you usually don't do that much new construction. So what was the evolution? Was that always a Hilton, or was it a different property? You acquired it first and then
Yes,
had the opportunity of extra land? Yeah.
there's a long history here. We've been working with this property since July 15th of 2015, which is when we acquired it. And typically in our business with private equity real estate owners, the standard is to execute on the business plan within 3 to 5 years and sell the property. So you can do the math. We're well past that at this point. We had COVID in there. We had Zika virus in there. We have a union. Many hotels in Aruba are union. So there was a handful of challenges that have caused us essentially to hold this property longer than we have. I'm proud to say at this point that we're achieving the profitability. The NOI stands for net operating income, is essentially the profit of a hotel that is higher than we originally expected in our underwriting. So we're doing a good job. We're seeing what we need to see. We're waiting to build this tower to formally execute on the business plan. But to go back to 2015, the hotel actually originally was purpose built as the Aruba Caribbean Hotel in the late 50s. And so as we're exploring this branding story, there's so much historical context and fun imagery and logos and stuff that we can pull from history, which makes the branding exercise very fun. But our whole business plan was, at the time, was a Radisson property when we acquired it in 2015. And the business plan, actually similar to our Ohana properties that we were mentioning earlier, was to convert into a Hilton. So there was Marriott property on the island, there was Hyatt property on the island, there's Intercontinental property on the island. And we thought that Hilton was an underrepresented part of Aruba and the Caribbean more broadly. So we were negotiating with Hilton. We had the PIP process. We completed that renovation in 2016 and converted to a Hilton, and essentially was ramping up as a new brand. I don't think we fully appreciated the ramp that it would take for a brand new brand in the Caribbean. And we spent a lot of money on marketing. We had advertisements in Times Square and hockey rinks, and eventually we got there, but it took longer than we expected, which I don't think anyone really fully appreciates up at the front. But we were doing really well heading into COVID, and then everyone knows what happened in COVID. We're very fortunate that Aruba and the entire Caribbean has performed very well. We've seen markets like Miami spike and then come down a little bit. We've seen markets like Europe do that as well. And the Caribbean spiked and has not come down as far as those other markets. So I think
What's unique about Aruba that's creating that, just from different islands around there?
yeah, we're seeing it in the Caribbean more broadly. I think Aruba is performing a little bit better than the general Caribbean, but all of the Caribbean is up markedly since 2019. And I think it's this unique balance of there's a lack of seasonality, generally speaking, outside of hurricane season. But for us in Aruba, one of the reasons I think this property and the island has performed better than the Caribbean is that the hurricane belt is above Aruba. So I think the last time they got hit, and I'm going to knock on wood here, was like 1867. Right? There's a lack of seasonality in Aruba. The year-round occupancies hover in the 80s. And essentially, I think it gives people the allure and the international flair that they're seeking without a terribly long flight. It's four hours and change to get to Aruba. So I think, and that's one of the most southernmost Caribbean islands. So it's accessible. I think, so it strikes the balance between achieving your international vacation that you want to take with your family, but it's super accessible. So that's been helpful for us. And then fast forward to this development process, we saw an opportunity when we were acquiring the property with our partners. And one of our partners is a private equity company that's based in Aruba. It's the only private equity company on the island. And we were introduced to them through, again, there's a theme here, relationships, right? The more you keep in touch with people. And this was a relationship that our principal had at the time. And we put together this investment team to acquire the property. And the local private equity company approached the government as part of the transaction process to secure development rights on the underdeveloped part of the parcel to add up to 250 additional guest room keys. It took us a little while to stabilize the property. Development is expensive. We know this. It's not just building the tower, it's the infrastructure, it's the FF&E, which I've learned a lot about over the last few years, the design process of that. And so it took us time to ramp up this property and stabilize it to a point where we were making enough money to get comfortable with the additional investment. And what the process looked like for that was essentially putting together a rough budget, interviewing project managers, understanding what this would cost us, and putting together an analysis of what the operational upside would be. Now that we were in a place pre-COVID where we understood where this asset could really perform at and what the Hilton customer wanted in the Caribbean, we could forecast out profitability for an additional tower. And we look at a metric called yield on cost, basically, which is a ratio of how much money your property is going to make on a stabilized basis versus how much money it cost to build it. And so I think we're building this thing for an 18% yield on cost, which is a very strong
Yeah.
ratio and certainly is evidence to our investors that this is a good investment. Where else can you get an 18% return, basically?
Not many places. Yeah.
Place nowadays. And so that
Right.
was the process from there to get people comfortable enough to take the next step and start spending money on consultants, project manager fees, architecture, and all the design documents and all that stuff.
I think you talked to them. Key is collaboration. So that being a crucial aspect of the hospitality industry, because it really is funding and land and putting all that together. So it seems like that was based on also having a local presence, and that really always helps enhance anything when you're in a different country. So that seems key. Are there any other kind of other projects where collaboration has been a key to their success?
All of them, all of
All
them.
right.
I think one of the things that I strive for, I think is also a key tenet of our company and what we do is relationship building and building trust and collaboration with our partners, both on the equity and the investment side, with our consultant partners like yourself, with our operators like Azul, we mentioned earlier, with Hilton, in the case of the Hilton Aruba, it's a Hilton managed property. And it takes a village and it takes teamwork. And somebody's gotta step up and be the conductor. And that can be different people at different times. But something that's extremely important to me and is one of the reasons I've stayed here for as long as I have at this company is because it's important to other people as well, is treating people with respect, practicing what you preach. If you expect people to respond in a timely manner, you should do the same. And it sounds basic, the golden rule as we were
Right.
taught growing up, but it's really important. And I would say there's not a single assignment that I've worked on here over the last 12 years where that hasn't been key to our success. And
Yeah.
even at the Napa and Sonoma properties where we have our monthly financial review, there are some months that are great and there are months that are not so great. And at the end of the day, we just have to work together as a team and figure out where our opportunities are. And it can be one month, it can be because we had a marketing shortfall. One month, it can be because we took a group at a low rate that we probably shouldn't have taken. But as long as you can have collaborative conversations with your team and just be open about it, right? Nobody's in the business to punish anybody else here, right? So as their success is our success and our success is their success. So let's talk about that group. Why did we book it? And then next year, when that group comes back and wants that low rate, what are we going to charge them so that we're not sitting here kicking ourselves that we took it? And so these are the type of analytical business decisions that in a lot of cases, operators are not comfortable talking about because they don't want to be put on the spot and they don't want to be punished. And it goes both ways. And I just think the more you can build relationships with people, both professionally and personally, the better off the financial results are going to be as you work together successfully in a team.
Yeah, no, for us also, just that respect and integrity, and that is just like key for us also. That's been definitely one of our core values. And I think for us, I'm a Colombian Irish dragon Leo, so I'm incredibly loyal. A New Yorker, born in New York. It's just so even when you came on a little harder, a little fast at the beginning, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to my New York attitude. So we're good. We're just going to get stuff done. So, but that's really key to really has been key to our success. And even for us, we see the shift. We were doing a lot more new construction, and we actually just recently switched to more renovation and PIPs and kind of things that have been holding over. And sometimes they're a little difficult because sometimes we got some drawings and we thought they were accurate drawings, and all of a sudden we measured some stuff, we didn't measure some other things. and things were off. So it's like having those honest conversations of, you gave us these drawings, you told us they were great. We didn't have to go get someone to measure it. And now they're off. And now we have some piece coming in from Vietnam and we were a little short on something. But I think working through those together is really the key to success for relationships, even when you have hard news to bring and make course corrections. And then maybe it's going to cost money, but then you know where to attack it on the next project and make that profit and for everybody to be good.
We had the exact same thing happen to us in Aruba, where there was information provided on the sewer system in the location where we're building a new beachfront restaurant. And our designers and our civil engineers relied on those drawings, and they didn't get a survey done. And you can sit there and you could say, why didn't we get a survey? Who are we going to punish for this? Who are we going to ask for a fee credit? Or you can sit there and say, if we knew about it, we'd be in the same place. We just would have known about it sooner. So how do we just get to the right solution? And look, it's very challenging when you're working in consultant teams of 25. But again, it just goes back to teamwork and treating people with respect and getting it done and staying organized. But yeah, that's happened. That's the one example that comes to mind. But there's probably 4 or 5 other examples where you're dealing with existing property and existing systems where that stuff comes up, and it's extremely challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I always love it. We just got a property in Lincoln City, Oregon, and like the drawings are on graph paper. And I'm like, what? So we had to go measure it. We measured it twice. I'm like, let's measure it 3 times. So get this right. Because we, had that little hiccup. We're like, no, we're not going to do it.
Measure 3 times, cut once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was twice and then once, but now it's 3. So
I'm interested to hear about your project at the Moxie, because in your other episode with Adam, I think that he was originally involved in that property, maybe?
yeah, they originally owned that as the Wayfair. And then during COVID, they sold it to Dauntless. And then Dauntless did, and that has a household component to actually build that hotel. And then they did some of the guest room renovation. And then they sold it to Andrew Firestone and Jess Parker. And they took that over, and they're in that area. So they're fantastic owners. And then we finished the conversion to the Moxie and did all the public areas and the pool area. But it's great property. So it's just been a fantastic area. So it was a real fun project to do. So that was a good one.
I was shocked, honestly, to see the photos of the property, because we work with quite a few Moxies. Typically the Moxies that we've worked in have been new builds. And they've been purpose-built as Moxies, and they've worked really well. And when I heard that you were working on that one, I was like, that's got to be challenging, because that's a pretty old building. And how are you going to fit sort of everything that you need within a Moxie and the lobby and the different zones that Marriott requires you to have? And I was amazed to see the properties, because you guys recently finished that renovation, right?
Yeah, we did. We actually had some great reviews and stuff like that. So it's been good. They're also in Santa Barbara, so they get some great rates there. So, and it's really, I think it's only, keep saying it's 34 keys, but I think it's actually only 32 keys, but they're definitely making money on that one. So that's been good. And yeah, working with actually Adam from Pacifica, we're also doing kind of a spyglass right now with him. It's like one of their first properties they created, or his dad bought when they lived up in Santa Barbara. And we're also working on Marina Del Rey with them. So they've been a great client. And actually, they also sold a different property in Santa Barbara to our other client. And we're trying to get this an autographed tribute started, but we're dealing with some funding issues in the area and stuff like that. So actually, even going back to like funding and some challenges right now, and obviously we have election coming up. Where are you seeing things with you acquired properties are being brought on? Is there any kind of delay with kind of just the current interest rates and everything that people are worried about and talking about?
Yeah, it's extremely challenging in the current climate to get stuff done. Adam even mentioned it in his episode, where they're having challenges too with the interest rates. There's just a big spread between what sellers are asking for and what buyers are willing to pay. And this has been an issue since even leading up to COVID. And the interest rate situation has obviously made things much more challenging. Thankfully, I think we're seeing a little bit of relief on the horizon with interest rates and some expected cuts in the Fed funds rate happening later this year and into next year. Of course, sitting here last year, I think people were thinking the same thing in the first quarter, and that didn't happen. So there's been some opportunities. We were looking at one deal in a major MSA recently that was about to get done, and that's confidential. I can't speak to it in too much detail, but unfortunately, there was legislation that came up that was completely unrelated to our specific situation. And these cities, whether it's East Coast or West Coast, we've seen a lot of legislation come up that's been pretty troubling for real estate owners and operators in different ways in different cities. And so unfortunately, where we were about to do this deal, now it's on hold because of something totally unrelated. So it just goes to show you that you can spend so much time evaluating these business opportunities and these new investments. And even at the last minute, something unexpected can derail. One of the last acquisitions that I was part of was a COVID deal in Silicon Valley. We bought 2 AC properties out there in Santa Clara and Sunnyvale. And at that point, financing was pretty readily available, but the rates and the spreads and how expensive the debt was depended on the business plan of your asset. And at that point, and unfortunately still, Silicon Valley obviously is a very business heavy, tech heavy, business heavy travel market. And that's one of the markets that has struggled to rebound to pre-COVID levels. And in that market, I think our business transient levels in terms of room nights booked is still only 75 to 80% of pre-COVID levels. So at the time, we had no problem getting the financing, but it was expensive because the lender said, I'm willing to take the risk, but I have to get paid for it because you're in a business market. We're in this global pandemic. Back in 2020, we didn't know where things were going to go. And thankfully, those assets have performed very well. And it's part of a broader portfolio. And we were able to get new debt to replace the expensive debt. And so the financing is out there. It's just a matter of the risk profile of the deal, the sponsor, meaning who's the leading equity partner that is contributing their equity, and what is their track record has an influence on what kind of debt you can get. But from a financing and a funding standpoint for our Aruba property, it's a very strange situation, to be honest with you. It's probably not applicable to many of your listeners or many of our US domestic deals, but there is a local syndicate bank in Aruba that was able to put together the loan that we needed for this development. And typically in the States, and again, I don't do a lot of development, but typically the development financing is at lower leverage and higher spreads, meaning if you're going to buy a hotel, maybe you would get 60 or 70% of the value of that property in the form of a loan, in the form of a mortgage, and you'd have to put in the 30% in your equity. If you're building a brand new property, typically that leverage is less, meaning if it's $100 million property, you might have to put in 50% equity and your loan would be 50% instead of that 60 to 70%. So we were very fortunate in that instance, again, with our track record with the bank, with our track record on the island, and our track record with the specific performance of this property. We were fortunate to be able to expand the existing loan that we had and keep many of the metrics in place. So there we have a loan that is a higher leverage and a lower rate than we would typically expect to pay for a development project. And part of that, I think, is also because we were able to keep the hotel open during the construction. And it's not ideal. And
Right.
we've done many things to work with our gracious guests to make sure that they still have a pleasant experience, which is very challenging when you're torquing steel, by the way.
Yeah.
We're trying to eat scrambled eggs at breakfast.
So free breakfast is there.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how we got the funding there, fortunately. But I'm aware of several examples here in the States where there's been extremely compelling properties that have been fully designed, fully vetted. They have 100% CDs, construction drawings, construction documents, and they haven't been able to get financed, which
Yeah.
is extremely unfortunate because as a ton of work that goes into that point,
Years that goes into it. Yeah.
years.
Yeah, actually, because we had next year Santa Clara. So we have actually the Cambria there and it's beautifully designed. All the specs are done and it's just sitting and waiting. So
That's
and we
you
also have,
guys?
that
Oh,
was
I
going
didn't
to be
know that. We've been talking about that for years. We were like, all right, when they finally
I'm back to
start,
plan, but you know, like,
that is so funny.
yeah,
Yeah, we're
yeah.
like, when they finally start, we're going to have the construction workers stay with us.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I know actually that one because that was when I was working at Ginsler, had that AC hotel right there. So it's a great
Yeah.
property. So I love it. Yeah, so that's a good one.
Those
Cool.
properties are beautiful, arguably over-designed
Uh-huh.
for the brand. But I think in terms of how design influenced the growth of a brand is interesting. And this is anecdotal. I can't speak to this with proof, but I think the fact that those 2 hotels at the time were designed and still were designed so above the brand standards for what an AC should be that
Right.
I think at the time maybe they were the 60th property
Mhm.
nationwide or something like that. There's over 100 properties now. I don't know the exact number. I think it's probably close to 150 at this point, but the new build ACs have started to look a lot like those properties. And every time Marriott comes and tours, they say, wow, this is amazing and, incredible property. And I just think it's really interesting. You can't help but think that you guys and the developers there were formative in the actual trajectory of the AC brand, which is really interesting.
It's nice to be a part of that. I think even just with Cambria for us, it's been being part of the trajectory and what the future could hold for that brand and kind of the choice window. So that's awesome. Actually, just start winding up. It's a little bit like, so for someone who's aspiring to be in the hospitality industry, like what kind of like words of wisdom, what would you have told your 10-year younger self? Because it's a dynamic industry and it takes a lot of and time and to be in deals for a long time. So is there anything you could share with us?
Yeah, for sure. If I could tell my ten years ago self something, I'd have a lot to say to him. I'll tell you that much. But I would say that, look, there's stuff that's technical and professional, and then there's stuff that's personal. And on the technical side, our business is so technical. I think when you go to a hotel and you have a nice stay as a customer, you just leave thinking, wow, that was nice. But when you work in the industry, you can actually fully appreciate the amount of work that goes into keeping these rooms clean, keeping these rooms up to date. These revenue management systems nowadays are extremely complex. And what it takes to negotiate a sales contract, we're hammering on our teams, book group, book group, book group. We love group, right? At the right rates. And once you do it and you understand what it actually takes to negotiate a group or a wedding client, I was a pain in the butt when I was negotiating when my wife and I got married in 2021. I can't imagine how difficult it is to be a sales manager and be on the receiving end of the negotiations. It's very difficult. I would say both there, professional and personal, like you have to have patience. You have to see the bigger picture and just what I've gotten better at over the years is just taking a breath and taking a step back and thinking about how to respond. And that's allowed me, I think, to maintain relationships in a better way because I'm very like that. I'm very quick. And if someone says something that I disagree with, I used to just jump right in and it's not always the best approach. And so I think what I would tell somebody, this probably applies to any industry, is just
Yeah.
take a breath, think about how you want to respond. And then I think everyone would be better off for that. From a technical standpoint, if you can get experience working in a hotel, I think it's fantastic experience, whether you want to be a consultant, a designer, an asset manager, someone who wants to buy and sell property as a private equity professional. It's an extremely complex industry that's very operationally intensive and labor intensive. And you look at the major asset classes like office, warehouses, residential real estate, and retail. And hotels are extremely volatile. They go up and down with the economy. There's correlation to GDP and the rates that we can charge and how consumers are feeling and the labor that it takes to run one of these buildings successfully and seamlessly it's just a different beast than what it takes to run an office building. Not that it's not challenging, it's just different in hotels. And so having that relationship with the operators, being able to speak, operator speak, being able to speak, private equity speak, I think has been one of the keys to our business model and our success of having people who have worked in both sides of the industry who employ the golden rule and treat people with respect. I think has been extremely valuable to my career and ours here. And again, just relationships and networking. I think this probably goes for your industry as well and keeping in touch with people. It sounds like you do such a great job of that with the members of your podcasts and the stories that you guys can tell. And I'm excited to maintain a relationship with you and your company. But it's so important and people roll their eyes when they say networking and it's so
Yeah.
tough to
Mhm.
network just to network.
Right.
And I frankly don't find it enjoyable, but I do find extreme joy and pleasure in keeping relationships with people just casually and catching up. And you find when there's not that extra pressure on it, it becomes very enjoyable and fun. And then down the line, it will yield results.
Yeah. No, I think these are totally true, like long-term relationships. And even for fact, for me, it's my son's an analyst over at Starwood Capital. And for
God
him, he's
bless.
just a big, yeah. And so they just opened up the one last year in Honolulu. But I think that whole thing, he's a big foodie also. So I feel like you guys would have a great time going out to dinner. Where I think I feel some kind of, honey, you got to go work in a restaurant, go see what it's like behind the scene because he's been traveling a lot and it's been great. But I also know for you, I'm on the other end of that child launched and you had a new baby. So even how your life's evolving with just getting married a few years ago and having a son, and that kind of changes your perspective of work and appreciation. And that pregnancy pause is like awesome because I feel like, even for me, designing so many hotels over the years, it's like not reacting and stopping and thinking and not blasting off that email is really critical. It could just wait a day and then it's going to put some thought into it. And then, or things usually settle out when there's all these emails that go through their thing. And you're like, all right, maybe the problem's solved by the end of the day and I could keep focusing my energy on things that matter most.
Yeah, absolutely. And my son Jack, he's named after my grandfather who passed away in
Mhm.
2018. It's been such an awesome he's 2 months today, actually. It's just been when he wakes up and smiles in the morning is the highlight of my day. And working, we talked a lot on this call about like relationships and partnerships professionally, but taking some of that into with my wife, Michelle, and just being able to create a partnership and communication is so important, obviously, in a marriage. And when you have a new child, it's so volatile. You're up at night. It's crazy. You don't know what's going on when he's screaming. This morning, there was a disaster on the changing table. I'll spare you the detail.
Yeah.
And instead of running to the office, I jumped in there and helped, and we attacked it as a team. And yeah, but it's so important. It's so important. And I've been really happy over the last 2 months. I think having a child, it sounds obvious, but having a child, this is our first, having a child has allowed me even to be more in tune on the professional side about what matters. And if someone has a disagreement of an opinion on the color of the wall of the guest room, it's not something that's worth getting into a heated argument about. Let's have a discussion about it and let's come to the best agreement and the best financial outcome for the asset for the investors. But what's helped me is not take stuff so personally. So it's been helpful from that
Yeah.
standpoint as
Yeah.
well.
Now, the blessing of a little maturity, which is great.
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Well, I just wanted to, first thank you because I know we have a new relationship over the past year or so, and just saying yes. And I think we're trying something new. So it's so great having people join us and with our audience from designers to developers and really sharing insights. But I think no one really shares insights on hospitality on a little more detailed level because there really is this like unique village that I think is like really special to be part of. And it's great meeting other people in the hospitality industry, and even seeing things from their perspective of what they're dealing with on a daily basis is very different than what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. So thanks for joining us today and look forward to kind of sharing that.
Yeah,
So
I'm looking forward to staying in touch. And thanks again for inviting me on your podcast. I look forward to seeing where it goes. And it was really fun chatting.
today's conversation has really highlighted the importance of thoughtful design and strategic management in the hospitality industry. And Rich, thank you for sharing your thoughts and everything. But for our listeners, I hope you found this discussion as enlightening as I did. And be sure to tune into the next episode of Elevate Hotel Design, where we'll continue to explore the future of hospitality design with more industry experts. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and stay informed of the latest trends in the hospitality industry. So thank you for listening.